Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023 Community Preservation Committee meeting. This meeting is being held both in person and virtually, and is being recorded by SNAP for future broadcast. This is pursuant to the executive order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law signed by Governor Baker, taking effect March 12, 2020, and subsequently extended by Governor Healy through March 31st, 2025. I would accept a motion to open the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Rich. Because we're a hybrid, things tonight will be done via roll call. So, John, Brady?
Here.
Opening. Yep, thank you. Dwight?
Yes.
Michael? I saw the yes. You're muted, Mike. Rich? Yes. And the chair votes yes.
Yes.
Thank you. From Chairman's report, the only thing I have is on the 28th of July, myself, Barry Castler, and Michael Barrett virtually met with a team of folks from the Hebrew Senior Life Center. They are proposing to the town that 210 affordable units for elderly be constructed here in Stoughton. This is something I've brought up in the past. The meeting was very productive. It included town staff members, and I look forward to a more detailed plan. They will be putting a pre-application into us that will be to us for our September meeting. And they are looking for some money to help offset that affordability aspect of things. So this is really good news. I don't want to delve too deep into it yet because frankly, we don't have a lot of the details, but as they continue to come to us, I will certainly keep you all updated and the public updated as best I can. That is all for the chairman's report. Administrator's report, Barry?
Okay. First of all, I'm happy to report that all the MOUs and grant agreements for the 11 new projects that were approved at town meeting have been signed, and I have them on file, so they are all set to go. I've been working with Fran Brutaniti, the town procurement officer, and with the individual applicants to kind of get them out of the starting gate and get them moving forward. The other thing I wanted to mention was that the Mass Coalition, the Community Preservation Coalition, has a new sponsor. They have been sponsored so far by the Trust for Public Land. They are still remaining with the coalition as a board member. However, their new sponsor will be something called Third Sector New England, which is an organization that assists nonprofit organizations in their growth and development. There's no change for us as a member. Well, actually, there is a small change. Normally, we were invoiced for our annual dues in July. Starting this year, we will be invoiced in September. Our annual dues are $3,500, as they have been since 2020, and that will not change. So I'm just giving you a heads up. We won't have to deal with this at the invoice in September.
Thank you, Barry. And I presume that this will be on our September agenda to approve the dues for the coalition, or is that not necessary?
Yes, that will be on our agenda.
Great, thank you. Anything else tonight, Barry?
That's it.
Awesome, thank you. Moving right along, treasurer's report. Michael, do you have an update for us, or is it unnecessary?
I do not have anything to bore you with tonight.
Nothing tonight. All right, no problem. I do not see any members of the public, but strictly for transparency purposes, is there any comments from the public this evening? And seeing as though we don't have any members of the public tonight, any comments the public might have or questions can always be directed to through email, or I think email is probably the best, at bcastler@stoughton-ma.gov. Harry is excellent about responding to people. So, and I just want to welcome John Morton, who is joined us a little bit late this evening. Hello, John. Item number 6, under new business, historic preservation restriction for the Stoughton Depot. Dwight and Barry, this is sort of both of you, if you want to take over and give us a quick update or review.
Yep, if I could just introduce this, the Stoughton Depot, because it was purchased with community preservation funds, needs to have a preservation restriction placed on it. The Stoughton Historical Society, I talked to Dwight about having them hold that restriction, and I'm going to turn it over to Dwight at this point. He can take it from this point forward.
Yes, for us to officially accept it, and it's at this point, it's not clear exactly, speaking to Barry, how the parameters of the agreement are going to be worked out, what the agreement is, but I'll speak to the board of directors a week from tomorrow night, and I believe that they will agree to do it, but it's a little complicated in that the criteria that we are supposed to be enforcing or applying are not clear to us at the moment. And it's possible that that gray area is good because it's building both on the National Historic Register, which has its own built-in, if only vaguely enforced, restrictions, and then other restrictions that the Historical Society will be called upon to enforce. I can see down the road, I mean, were the building to be put out to a renter who wanted to run a business in there, I mean, restaurants, what's been put forth, and then certain structural changes were proposed, to make a call on that could be a tough and controversial thing. I mean, off the top of my head, it seems like we would propose okay expansion of the kitchen, but given the fact that it's a historic building, but might have a commercial use, should the town be able to get a lease from someone who wanted to run a business in there, this is, potentially controversial, but I don't know what other entity short of the Historical Commission, which is also, that's a town body. The Historical Society is slightly more independent. So I think we're going to be agreeing to do it, but I would say now the actual restrictions that we will be enforcing aren't clear. But over time, I mean, we'll come more clearly in focus. But I mean, I guess it's the job of the Historical Society to enforce the rulings as they already stand, or the definitions of the rules that already stand, but then also apply their own judgment to say yes or no to a given, I mean, I think additions of petition are more acceptable than actual removal of walls and things. But again, we're into a gray area here. It could be very simple, but given other circumstances down the road, it might be complicated. So that having been said, we are agreeing to do it ostensibly, but what exactly are we agreeing to do? Barry said it's in the work to find what it is, and the town will also put its own criteria in. I don't know, Barry, do you want to continue anything you said to me earlier, or was that just conjecture?
Well, one of the things that you just touched upon was that the building already is on the National Historic Register. The state Massachusetts Historical Commission oversees anything on the register in Massachusetts. And I would imagine that, and again, we haven't put together a historical preservation restriction in Stoughton, but I would imagine the restrictions would be pretty close to what's already in place by virtue of the fact that the building is on the historic register.
And Barry, if I could, Dwight, for just a second, you may not be aware of this, but one of the concerns we had as a committee was the lack of understanding as to what we were going to use the building for, whether it be public or private use, and you had brought that up in your conversation. The select board did vote, I believe it was unanimous, Barry, correct me if I'm wrong, but they voted to keep the use of the building public use, which means, at least at this time, they wouldn't be leasing this out to a commercial entity. I would think that from the historical commission's point of view, base the restriction on what you have before you, which is a public use building. And then I agree with Barry, we would just conform to whatever the state and national registries require of this sort of property.
Right, there may be other judgment calls where, let's assume just hypothetically that the little theater gets use of the building, and there are additions that they want to make it more of a theater space. And, in general, our policy would be, well, you can add things that are of a temporary nature, but you can't take things out like walls that are there because they're in the way. And that's just a general example of how I think we'd enforce this, but I think in the short term, we can agree to do it and work out the details later.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dwight. I believe that that's exactly what we'd be looking to do, and I'm glad to hear that. Barry, will you continue to work with Dwight and the historical commission to ensure that we check all the proper boxes and that everybody's comfortable with anything before we send it to council?
Yes.
Thank you. Anything else on that at this point?
May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
You most certainly may, John.
Is anybody actually talking to the historical commission, and does the historical commission have a sense that we're moving forward with a project on that building?
I can answer that because the commission does not have any sense of that. The commission right now on our plate is the barn and historical signs, but the historical commission is not currently involved in plans for the building other than listening to informal proposals that are put out there. But at the moment, people aren't putting the proposals to us, but eventually, at a minimum, we would have to approve them.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Anything more, John? At this time?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Any other members? Hearing nothing. Let's see, item number 7, project updates. Just brought up the West Street barn evaluation. Dwight, you're up again, and
Well, you people, you have seen the recommendation or the report done by the consultant, which, on the face of it, nominally proposes possibly $165,000 estimated cost of repairs to a variety of different things, from the roof to the structure to moving it. In a previous conversation with Mark and Barry, I've said that the historical commission at its last meeting agreed, but not in any final sense, that for the moment, given the fact that we can't come to town meeting with a use of the building, and eventually, having said that, we may still have to come back to town meeting and without a use for the building, but say we don't have a use, but by God, we're asking for 200,000 or whatever to do the nominal repairs. So, the plan for the moment was not to propose any repairs this year for town meeting, but to try and get the permission of conservation and then the use of the town forestry people to clear the land around it so it was more visible, and it did take away some of the surrounding vegetation that the report mentioned as being deleterious to the livelihood of the building. So
yeah,
I could be convinced that if someone said, well, no, by God, you should go to go for 200,000 to fix that stuff up now because the barn's not getting any younger. But my sense was to wait a year, get the barn cleared off. Maybe you would have made progress in terms of having a use more defined. Barry, I believe, told me that he's interested in pursuing certain things. Anyway, that's our sense of the commission said for the moment. We weren't going to put an article in for that. We would ask them to clear around the barn.
So if I may, and I don't generally speak first on these sorts of things, but in the report, what they were basically stating was these are things that will stabilize the building and keep it from deteriorating further. The cost of this is relatively reasonable. And if you remember when Dwight and I first came at this and made the mistake of sort of generalizing things without this report, it wasn't taken very well by town meeting. However, we now have some pretty clear defined sense of what it will take to stabilize this. There won't be any further damage. We know that under ideal circumstances, we as a committee would like to see agricultural use for this property and barn. However, we don't own it. The Conservation Commission does. So I would like to hear from others, but my sense of this is to move an application forward this year for the upcoming town meeting so that we have the ability to at least stabilize the building, keep it dry, fix the smaller foundational issues and get it cleared. Whether or not DPW does the clearing or we have to hire somebody remains to be seen, but I didn't see this, particularly getting rid of the junk, as a bad thing. And if in the future Concom decides, yeah, we want to use it for agricultural as well, we can stabilize the building so we can address the use at a further date. I just really kind of think that I don't want to come into this 3 years from now and say we need 700,000 to tear it down. And we could have saved it for 160 or what have you. Just my thoughts, but I'd like to hear everybody else. Rich, you're in the room. Go ahead.
I agree with Mark. I think we should do something now. We paid good money to buy that property. The property includes the barn. So as a town, we should have an obligation, I think, by us wanting to buy that property, paying a fair price that we would at least minimally maintain that building. If it means to spend what the report recommends, which after reading it, that's a reasonable amount. If it's an accurate number, that's a pretty reasonable amount to get the building doing. And as far as the uses, one, we own it, we have a right to maintain it like many other structures now. Secondly, its use, not only agriculturally, but that should be part of our curriculum for the history courses, grade 1 to grade 12. Stoughton has so much rich history, extending all the way back to our foundation, our founding, that it could be incorporated as part of, not just in the textbook or a handout, but actually visit this as part of the historical curriculum, each grade being, more intense as you get closer to senior year. I think if we approach the town with those multiple uses and responsibilities, they would have to agree that we need to do at least a minimal amount of repair to maintain that 1805 structure.
Thank you, Rich. Michael, you had your hand up next?
Yeah, I think I was going to go along with the same line of thought. I mean, I'm concerned that we won't get far with town meeting without a use. I understand that point, but it doesn't feel right to let it go on for another year or 2 or 3, because it's only going to get more expensive. It's only going to hurt the building. So I think we'd be better off going forward and asking for the money and maybe hastening this, if we can, the decision as to what we want to do with it. But if it just sits there for another year or 2, then I think it's going to be even that much more difficult with town meeting. That was it.
I agree, Michael, and I think that I certainly have no issue with, excuse me, approaching Concom again. I know that we had sort of reached out back some time ago about this, and Concom is one of the busier boards, if you will. It's a commission, but they see a lot of activity, much like the planning board, different, but you know, a lot. So I understand how this got, you know, sort of shifted to the back burner, but I believe if we began the process of putting an application together, bringing it forward to town meeting while communicating with Conservation Commission and Jerry McDonald and our representative, John Morton, I think we could at least in principle get an idea as to what we want to do with the land. That's my opinion, but.
It's a town-owned structure. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is a budget to maintain our properties. School budget is separate, but all other structures owned by the town, we have a budget to maintain them, like town hall and other buildings. I would think that part of the approach would be to try to have that some amount put into the town budget for maintenance on an annual basis, not just hit and miss. And also, through our application for as much as we can get, I think we can make a good argument at town meeting.
That's not a bad idea. We always smile upon matching funds, and the unfortunate part of this is it's not a building that's high on the town's priorities. But your point is well taken. It doesn't matter. It's still a town-owned building, and it still needs to be maintained. I think do any other members have any thoughts on this? If we were to decide to put something together, Dwight, would you assist with that?
Yeah, well, once we're finished with the discussion, I mean, I'm prepared to go back to Historical Commission and rethink it unless you think I mean, who else would propose it? I mean, the CPC itself.
It would have to come from the CPC, I would think, either yourself, where you sort of spearheaded this initially, or the CPC in general, like, John, what do you ever?
Excuse me, has the CPC ever proposed a bill itself? Hasn't it always come from some other entity?
Well, it came from you the last time.
Right, but that was via the Historical Commission.
Yes. And
wearing that hat, and under that model, if we thought that it made sense to apply for something, I could go back to the Historical Commission in our next meeting and say, here's the thinking of the people on the CPC. What do you think if we apply for? But I mean, just to review the history, I mean, the first year when we were turned down, we added and repairs, which seemed to be the kiss of death to it. It was going to be study and repairs. And the end repairs, but I mean, that was a little more money. It was for, I don't know, we were going for 60,000. It wasn't a big amount of money, but then the next year when we left out and repairs and just went to the study and asked for whatever we asked for, we got that. Philosophically, well, yeah, it was harder to get people to start going toward repairs than it was to go toward, well, let's study it and see what we have. Now you're suggesting we take the step of actually going to the repairs. I would say, based on that list she gave, we could pick a certain amount of money to ask for, but then I think we have to prioritize it, because I suspect by the time we get to the bottom of that list, it's going to be costing considerably more than $155,000. I mean, just given the way prices are. And so if prioritize something like roof first, and then I mean, we'd have to then say, what's the order we're going for, and what's the amount we're finally asking for? You know, the study suggested 165,000. I'm saying I don't think we can do all that stuff for that amount of money. Then the question is, what do we ask for? And do we put in the actual article how we're prioritizing roof, support structure, removal of junk? Because at some point, I think the money is going to, well, as it does in all our projects run out, the Glen Echo or Cape and Reynolds, the money runs out after you've got the original article, and we should have some sense of how to prioritize what we're doing first before the money runs out. And
I don't disagree, Dwight. I want to hear from John, but my instinct is to ask you to go back to the historical commission and request that we put an application, that you put in an application. John, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. First of all, I agree with Dwight that we have to prioritize, and at some point, we're going to have to start saying no to projects. With respect to the barn, I believe that it has value as a historic relic, if you will. But I think that we would be more convincing if we went to town meeting with an actual purpose. And that's the responsibility of the Conservation Commission. And I would propose to the Conservation Commission, I'm a member and so I can bring it up, that the Conservation Commission develop a specific plan that would basically attempt to find a use acceptable to the public for that land. Now, for example, I have an image of a farm project that has public access to see animals. In other words, priority being given to a farming proposal that integrates sort of a public process, the public access with the farming process. And basically what I'd say is if you could go to town meeting, if we could go to town meeting and say, we want to protect this historic relic, but at the same time, we wish to make land productive and do it in a way that involves the public. I think that the whole thing would be much more attractive and more likely to succeed.
I agree with you, John, and that's, Rich touched on that a little bit. You'll remember, it was over a year ago now, I came to Concom with the same concept and totally agreed that having public access is going to be a part of this, an important part. I guess, from my perspective, we need to at least have a pre-application in by September 25th, a full application by, is it October 25th, Barry?
Yes.
Yeah. So in sort of thinking about this, we have a couple of steps we're going to need to take. One with the historical commission to even get them to agree to put in the application, and then conservation commission for a use. But if we don't hustle and get at least an application in, we're going to lose the shot at it this year coming. So just my thoughts. Barry?
Yeah, I was going to follow up on that. First by saying that as you say, I agree, it makes sense to submit an application. We still have until May, basically to decide whether or not to go forward at the next town meeting. We can always pull it if we decide that it doesn't make sense to go forward so soon. The second thing I was going to say was that the first time that the town rejected the article, number one, that was a tie vote, if I remember correctly. It would have needed just one more vote to pass. And the second thing is that it was at a special town meeting, which is, for whatever reason, notoriously more difficult to get things approved at than the annual. So that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you for that reminder. We are.
So I think and I take responsibility for this. We went into that with sort of we're going to get it studied and then we want to use the money to do whatever we need to do. That was really the wrong approach. Town meeting needs to have order to these things. I think that application, and it still only lost by a tie, but that application sort of proved that town meeting has a willingness to support these types of projects, but they really want to know what's going on. They want to be upfront. So we came back and got the money to do this study, and now it's sort of, we have a choice to make. Do we want to move forward and take the advice of those we hired to do that, or not? And I think it's a good idea to bring something forward come the spring. I do not agree with the fall town meeting application.
Rich, what if you recall, when you put your first proposal out for study and repairs, you listed you needed 50% plus one vote.
Yeah.
You got exactly that.
Right.
In a virtual meeting at the end of the night when many people had fallen asleep. So I take it as a big positive. You've already got the study done. Let's go back and get this and try to position when we have this presentation, when people aren't asleep at the end of the night at 10:30. And hopefully we won't ever have another town meeting, a virtual town meeting. The other good thing about a virtual town meeting is that people who talk too much didn't get a chance to talk too much. But I think you're in a good position to go back and win it.
So next steps, first of all, I apologize. Is there anybody else who wants to comment before? Hearing nothing. I think the first step has to be, Dwight, go back to the commission and ask them if they're willing to have an application put forward on their behalf for this park, based on the study information we have.
And based on the numbers we see in front of us, informally, what would you suggest is the right amount to ask for? With them saying 155, 165, we feeling that that's not enough to do it all, does $200,000 seem in the ballpark, or 250, or before we were asking for much less. When we got our tie vote, we were asking for 30 or something, I think.
So what I'd like to do with that, Dwight, is approach Graham Brutini, our town procurement officer. The town has generally been looking to add 30% in contingencies and construction contingencies. So I want to run it under her nose, and Barry, you could do that, in the next week or two before our September meeting. I feel more comfortable hearing the answer from her. That's just my personal opinion. And then we can discuss this at our next meeting as to the final number, but I think it's fair to say you could probably say 155 plus 30%, or maybe even more if the town suggests that. John, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just to comment that I think 200,000 is probably where we should be. And because, for example, when we approved certain repairs on the Cape and Reynolds farm, we did not add anything for the management of the project or for the engineering and so on. And there's always those kinds of things that come up. I think we learned a lesson with Cape and Reynolds. We've got to make sure there's enough money to handle contingencies and somebody to oversee the project if it's a major complex project. If this is the historic preservation, it might add a component of cost as well.
One of the major questions in terms of cost is when there is restoration of the beams which are partially hand hewn 1800, 1810 beams, and you are then supporting them with new timbers. Do you go with more hand hewn, tongue and groove type beams at a huge cost, more than, milled lumber, 2x4s, whatever? I mean, that was, and also it's likely that we're going to have more than one contractor. I mean, it's you envision someone would do the roof, someone else would do the structural work inside, and it's possible that a third company would remove, demolition of the milk place, which has been recommended, but also removal of a lot of stuff inside. So there are at least 3 different kinds of tasks to be done. I, off the top of my head, would prioritize roof. And then, if you start to work on the structural stuff before you actually remove, I think the trash is a smaller fee, but then it's a question of demolition of small house to the right, as opposed, and then beginning to do various structural supports inside, either at the corners or the rafters. So when John talked about not paying for having a manager, it just made me think how one works the process by which, if you get one company to do the roof, another company to do the structural support, a third company to do the demolition and maybe removal.
So my opinion on that point is we do have a policy that allows for us to appoint Barry, our program administrator, as an overseer of these projects. I wouldn't have an issue with something of this size going to Barry. But of course, that's a decision for the committee as a whole. Certainly given Barry's professional experience, this is something that he could handle. Michael, I saw you, but Rich, you had your hand up. Do you need to?
Yes, White, you mentioned some of the water subtended beams that have placed. We had an experience with Cape and Barn about 23 years ago when we went to re-roof with shingles, asphalt shingles, and we found that a beam about this big by about 15 feet long had to be replaced. And I actually found a company, I believe in Harvard, Massachusetts, that specialized in taking an entire barn down and then selling it to somebody else who wanted to resurrect it. They did have pieces of barns that had no home, so to speak. And I was able to go there with a photograph and dimensions of what we needed to be best back into the roof of the barn, and found the exact piece I needed, 4 pieces. And believe it or not, the carpenters that were doing the shingling put it in, and they did such a good job. Our building inspector couldn't identify which beam had been replaced until we pointed it out. So the availability of materials of that uniqueness is very available to us.
Yeah, good point. Now, who was the overseer? Was there one person that oversaw that whole project, including the beams and the shingles, or how did that work?
Basically, at that time, the Friends of David Farm donated all the money to do the removing of the old shingles and replacement of new shingles. And when we found that piece that had to be replaced, we ended up the money and the carpenter did the job. And the building inspector kept an eye on it.
And what were you saying, 2 or 3 or 4 pieces needed to be replaced? Well, give me a number on that.
I think, 25 years ago, I'll put it back in my notes, but I think the roof cost is $4,000 labor and material with shingles. The beams, I think I paid $150 for, and then whatever the labor was for the carpenter to put it in, it was minimal. But that's really not the point. The point is to find material that we can use to replace water beams that look like what they really are.
Right.
You can also have a mill. We have a gentleman who owns a mill right here in town. So
Joe saw that.
yeah,
Excellent.
yep, he is. Michael, you had a comment? I thank you for.
Yeah, no. So my primary concern is I'm hearing that we just hired a consultant, paid some good money to get some estimates, and we don't believe the estimates.
No, we believe
That said, I think some of the ideas that were mentioned, the contingency needs to be thrown in there because of rising costs and unknowns, as well as I like John's idea of money or having Barry do it as a project manager to ensure that we stay within the budget proposed by the experts that we just paid this money to.
That's right. I agree with you, Michael.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't give me a lot of confidence to go to town meeting and say, we don't like these estimates. I feel a lot better saying we like these estimates, but to make sure we're gonna get there within proposal, we're gonna add a contingency and we're gonna add a manager to help us get through it. Subtle, maybe it's a subtle difference, but it's, I don't like the sound of not using their estimates.
So I reached out because I know nothing about this stuff, if I'm being honest. I don't know the way municipal operations work. So I had reached out to Fran and says, look, I got this estimate from MMT and I'm curious. I mean, can we go with this? And she said, absolutely. They're a vendor that works with Stoughton, a trusted vendor. Apparently there's a list of people that are go-to folks for this type of work, and this company does fall within those parameters. So Fran had no problem saying, if those are the numbers she gave you, yes, I want to add a contingency. Yes, I want to make sure there's money there for an OPM. And she says, the one thing you may want to think about is if we need to do design, you'll want to include the monies for design as well. Now, I said, is there circumstances where design can be sort of waived because it's an older barn and we're sort of going with, you know, fix it as you go kind of thing? And she says, yeah, in a situation like this, it's possible. It could be waived, but it is something you as a committee should think about before moving forward with an application. So I personally am comfortable with the numbers because my procurement officer said, be comfortable with the numbers. As far as contingencies, project managers, those sorts of things, maybe a design cost, if it's necessary. I'm open to all those things, but I'm told these numbers are fairly good, right?
The design costs make sense to consider because if you see the pictures, the way the current supports of the barn have been jury rigged with pieces of, you know, 2x4s here and spaces left there, but basically stuff put in just so the barn's not going to fall in. So then to create the design or decide, okay, given this is what you have, what's it going to look like when you put, I love Rich's ideas of the reconstructed timbers, but then what's the pattern that we are now following with these new timbers are going in there? And whether that's done by someone called design or it's part of the contract we hire is a question to be asked, I suppose. But it is complicated in that it's not, I mean, if you're replacing the roof at Cape and Reynolds, I think that was more simple because underneath our underpinning on the old end, if you've seen the pictures, you know how, well, to repeat myself, jury rigged the beams and crossbars are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm following what Fran says because it's part of procurement law. Anything that exceeds $100,000 requires design. There are certain instances where that can be waived if there's a clear path, but at the end of the day, if that's what our procurement officer is telling us, then I want to follow that. So Michael, you made a great point. Those would be the three additional things I think we need to sort of look at and determine ahead of time. With that said, Dwight, I guess, you know, if it is the will of this committee, let's ask the historical commission if they're willing to put that application forward between myself and Barry and anybody else who wants to participate. We can cross the T's and dot the I's as far as the other three items goes and what it would cost to get those included. If we put it, you know, at least get a pre-application to us for September and then the full application by October. As Barry said, if we decide, look, the thing, you know, is falling down after all, or something happened and additional damage, there's no harm in pulling it, but there's an expense to tearing down a building like this too, and it's quite a bit more than what I'm seeing on this report. So just my thoughts.
Did I see the September, where did the date September 25th? That's just is that a deadline for pre-app? I mean, after our September meeting, but before our October one?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, I, you know, still have as many questions as I answers, but I hear the, you know, I think the sense of the committee, those of you who are vocal, that you'd like to see us go for something here. I can go back and talk to the historical commission, pass on your suggestions, think of a model. Well, pick a number, look at the proposal again and see how the numbers go and come back with, I believe, a pre-application with a number by September 25th, assuming the historical commission, agrees to that. That's what I will try to do.
Yeah, I would like a sense by our September meeting from the historical commission that you at least intend on bringing an application forward. As far as the details, I would like the committee to give Barry permission to work with Graham Root Media, procurement officer, to ensure that all the Ts are crossed and the Is are dotted prior to September 25th, so that all can be included in the final application. Does everybody agree with that approach?
Yes.
Yeah,
All right, so Barry, if you'd be kind enough to check with Fran, I want to ensure that we have funding for design if it's needed. A solid contingency on the quoted numbers we received in the report. And I would think a number for owner's project manager. We have a system where we can include the money for it. And if we decide that Barry, this is something Barry is, capable of doing, which I think he is, and furthermore, that Barry is comfortable doing it, the money comes back to us if we don't spend it. We'll end up spending that money in administrative costs anyway. So either way, I want to have that contingency in place is my point.
The USDA has a program that will grant monies for the restoration of historic farms. And there's a number of examples in Massachusetts, but it's not an easy application, but I think it's worth investigating. And if we can get $20 or $40 or $50,000 towards any one of the items we've just discussed, that's nice to go to town meeting.
Would you be willing to at least look into the grant and give us the information?
Why, I'll do that. I'll look into it. I will say this, I'm leaving Saturday for Jamaica. I'll be back at 12.
It's not a huge rush. We have until September 25th. So if you can manage to dig up that information prior to our next meeting, that would be helpful. John?
Yeah, I think there may be an issue. If Barry is going to spend time monitoring this, we could clearly pay him from the administrative account, but I don't think we could pay him from the project budget, because that would be basically paying ourselves from the project budget. I think we need an opinion of council if we do it that way.
I don't disagree, John. I know there's ample money in the administrative account on an annual basis. We rarely spend it all. The closest we came was to maxing out Barry's hours during the time when we were working on the COVID relief fund. But we did not max out our administrative fund, although we came closer than normal. It's something I want to obviously discuss, but I don't think you're wrong, John. I think we might have an issue paying them separately, feeding out of, which is why we include the money for it, for anybody to do it. But if we decide to have Barry do it, I think we have to ensure that there's enough funding there to do it out of the administrative.
Yeah, if I could, I had the same thought as John, that I guess if I end up doing it, it would make sense to pay me out of the administrative account and not out of the project account.
Absolutely.
And the reason it's more demanding, I mean, there's probably going to be a fair amount of on-site stuff. There may be more than 2 contractors doing, different jobs along the way. So the on-site presence, may be a little more complicated and varied with other responding to things. So to say Barry will do this when he has a chance, may be asking a lot, given what may be necessary here.
It's exactly why I think we include the money as part of the application, and Barry's a big boy. He'll look at this and say, yeah, this is not gonna be a problem for me, or he'll say, you know what? It's too much for me to handle on top of my regular.
Okay, but when you say include the money for the application, then we would be putting in how much for the manager based on the numbers we're talking about?
I want to have Fran Brutney tell me how much money we'll need for this. So that's why Barry's gonna reach out to Fran. I don't know off the top of my head, but she will know. So, I have every confidence in our town procurement officer.
So what we would be doing under this model, taking the estimate that we were getting from the people, but without undercutting it, with Michael, we are simply building on it based on the way the town does projects and the needs that are likely to arise on top of the bare bones costs that we're getting from the consultant. So I think
Exactly.
it's a model by which we could justify a significantly higher number because we're following recommendations of Fran, preparing for a manager, and et cetera.
But that's the way it works, Dwight. So, if we're going to approach a project, we do approach it properly. So yes, there'll be additional costs and there'll be a contingency based into that number that we were given from MMT, but that isn't, we don't trust their numbers. That is the increase of costs that we've seen happen in construction over the past 2 years, give or take. Michael, you were going to say?
Exactly. I think that's a much better way of putting it, Dwight. It's a much better selling mechanism, if you will.
Yeah. Duly noted.
John, one last comment?
Yes, just very quickly. If you hire a general contractor to do the entire project, the general contractor will be picking the subs, will be taking care of each piece of it, and will be responsible for the whole job. That's different from a project manager who basically looks to make sure, in the case of a historic preservation, that the general contractor who is picking the subs, who is managing the subs, is doing it within the context of historic preservation. So the job of our agent is to make sure that not to pick the subs, but to make sure that the general contractor is adhering to what is at least the minimum requirements of historic preservation.
And that is assuming that we can get a general contractor who will then cover, and maybe that's quite possible. General contractor will cover X, Y, and Z's that we see in the report.
Well, if you get a general contractor to build a house, that's exactly what they do. They bring in the plumbers, they bring in the roofers, the window guys, the hot sheetrock guys. They don't do it themselves. They bring in people. And that's what a general contractor does. But that doesn't mean that they do it in a historically correct way, and that's where we come in.
Right. I think we're all on the same page. We're just looking at it from slightly different angles at this point. Barry, you have your tasks before you. You're going to contact Fran and work out some of the details. Dwight, you're going to go to the Historic Commission. And I think most importantly, John, we would like to talk with Conservation Commission.
Yes, and I will go to them and propose that we prepare a plan that would show us capable, if the barn is preserved, of going out with proposal to have sort of a public access type of farm operation on the site.
Sounds like a plan. Everybody knows what they're up to. We don't need a motion for this, do we? This is sort of a discussion at this point. So, everybody knows their piece. I think we can go on until September's meeting and get an update there.
Sounds good.
Yeah, everybody's in agreement?
Yes.
All right. Next item, item A, Stoughton ancient documents. White, where are we at with this?
Well, the documents have been downloaded on hard drives to the society, So we have them on hard drives in two different forms. The tip is a huge amount of memory. So we have them. We've announced that we have them, but we haven't put them on our website or worked out with the library that they will put them on theirs. But I can take it as, and I guess I have to bring to the board of directors of the Historical Society proposing that it's right that we offer to have the hard drive on a link at the library. And then, of course, if the library agree that they will do it. So I would put that on my to-do list.
Okay, is that something that Barry can assist you with, or?
Well, only by some gentle reminders. I mean, I think we don't have much money left. It's a question of getting my guy who's runs the website and has sort of knows how to throw the information that we have around. What if the library agrees to do it? How do we transfer it to them? And that's getting a little over my head in terms of the IT part of it. But I don't know that. I mean, we know we got a few $100s left, but I'm not sure how that would be helpful given what we have to do.
Yeah, my thought is that you take you have it on a jump drive, and you take that to the library and ask them to upload it to their website, and then all your web person has to do from the Historical Society is just create a link, a hyperlink from your website to that location at the library, on the library's website. That part's pretty simple.
So that sounds great. Is this something, I'm only bringing this up because, through town meeting, this was agreed to be done. It's a good idea. Cost us very little when you look at the overall scale of what the preservation of all these documents cost Canton. They didn't burden us with a heavy part of this cost. So, but we paid for it, and it's taxpayers' money. So I'm just looking to ensure that in the vein of transparency, the public has access to this information. That's, if you'd be kind enough, Dwight, I mean, you want to give it until our October meeting for an update on this, or are you?
Yeah, well, because the harder thing for me, I mean, we got this historical commission piece, but I mean, so it's something to do. As you say, the public has not been beating down the doors to access these documents. If they were, it would have happened a long time ago. So it's kind of a self-motivational thing on our part and a responsibility we have because we got CPC money to then put it out there and then remind the town that we have this and say, would anybody like to look at these? And it's our job to promote it, but I think the nature of why it's taken so long is simply the lack of, we had a meeting that we shared with Canton. We talked about the documents, had a program on it, looked at them, and that's where it stopped. And I don't know that Canton has put them online yet either, which is not a reason for us to not do it, but I'm just saying it's the kind of thing that happens later rather than sooner under these circumstances. That's all I can tell you.
Right.
But I'm taking on the task of putting it on my top 5 things to do.
So I think, my bigger concern is just having an understanding as to a path on it by October's meeting. I'm not, don't feel, if you can get them up, great, but this is more about letting the public know where we stand with it and that it's moving forward. That's all. So thank you for that, Dwight. Barry, if you put it on our October meeting and then maybe give Dwight a gentle push from time to time, that would be helpful. Thank you. Any other comments on these ancient documents before we move on?
The one thought that comes to mind in terms of promoting it, in our public hearing, it'd be great to be able to say to the public, either they're online for you to go see them, or they're going to be online and you're going to be able to see them via the live, however it works. But we should and can help promote it via things like that.
Absolutely. Good point.
I also think that you have the Historical Commissioner Society, I don't know which one, has a specific spot on the town website And all you have to do is add a paragraph there that says, with a link saying, all these documents are available, tune in by clicking on this link.
Right. But then to be realistic, I'm just saying, we know that to promote it actively on Stoughton News, our Facebook site, Stoughton, whatever, that's the way that we'd actually drum business in, but that's just part of what we have to do. So,
Sounds like a plan. We'll look forward to the update in October. Thank you, Dwight. Next item, administrative items. So we have 2 sets of minutes for approval, June 7th and June 28th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes written by Barry for June 28th, 2023?
There's a correction.
Yep, please.
On the last item, number 7, adjournment, says motion made by Mr. Terry Barrett, seconded by Mr. Barrett. I think it was
Barry, go back and check who made the motion to adjourn.
I made the motion, but by Mr. Terry, not Mr. Terry Barrett. Mr. Terry Barrett.
So I think what happened, you made the motion to adjourn, Michael seconded it?
Yes.
Yes,
Exactly.
Mike did alert me to that, and I did make that correction preemptively.
Thank you. Is that it?
That's it.
You know, that's a pretty easy one.
Barry, it was not made on the latest one that you sent out.
No, well, you're right, I hadn't changed.
Okay.
Well,
I think
okay,
that's
you're
why
right,
Rich
I
brought
didn't
it up.
change it on that.
Because I looked.
Yep. That's not the copy that I used to submit,
Yeah,
but you're
no, I
right, I
figured.
hadn't made it on that copy.
All right, so, is there a motion to approve the minutes with that correction?
So moved.
Second,
Second from John. All those in, any further discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, by roll call, John Brady,
Yes.
Dwight,
yes.
Michael,
Yes.
John Morton,
yes,
Rich,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, so 28th is approved. And Barry, you'll make those changes. June 7th, 2023 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as written, or are there any corrections?
I will make a motion to approve.
second,
You get a second from John Morton. Any discussion or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, by roll call, Don,
Yes.
Dwight,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
John Morton,
yes,
Rich.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So there's 2 seconds. See, next item. Reminder on CPC terms expiring. So we have Mr. Morton, Mr. McCarron, and Ms. Alotu.
Actually, Mr. McCarron has already gotten sworn in.
Excellent, thank you. John Morton, have you been sworn in and reappointed, I presume?
no, I haven't. I have to go down to the town hall when I come down next.
Okay, but you were reappointed, you just haven't been sworn in. Correct?
Yes, I will, I've been reappointed, yes, by the Conservation Commission.
Okay, so if you'd be kind enough to make sure you get that done before our September meeting, that would be helpful.
I will be sure to do that.
And Barry, will you follow up with all about me?
Yep.
Thank you. Any other unanticipated new business or emergency matters to come before the board tonight?
Well, I will only say that on my to-do list, I mean, you'll be getting a proposal for probably 15 historic signs from the Historical Commission. And the responsibility for that will be dueling with these other ones that have been enumerated here. So apparently I will be one of the busier members, at least on paper, of this committee.
So,
Pray for me.
yes, we will. And more importantly, I'm here to help, as is Barry. So, We have a really good crew of people here, so if there's any help you need, reach out to any one of us. We're all fantastic and willing to help.
Thank you.
Any other items? Hearing nothing, our next meeting will be Wednesday, September 6th, which is the first Wednesday of the month, which brings us to item 13, which is reorganization of the CPC. This is something we generally do later rather than earlier because our appointments expire on June 30th. So I don't believe we had time, or our July meeting was a little hectic. So we are going to do that tonight, and I'm actually going to turn this over to the Vice Chair, Dwight, to ask for nominations for chair. So Dwight?
Okay, I will entertain nominations for chair of the CPC.
I
I
nominate.
nominate Mark.
I second Mark's nomination.
So nobody's jumping at this, huh?
Mark, you're doing a great job.
Yes, you are.
I feel like, do we have any other nominations? So someone move that we accept Mr. Zemanian as our chairman again. I think that's appropriate.
I think we should have a vote, a roll call vote.
Right. Well, first of all, we have to, does someone have to nominate him and second it? Is that,
That we
The
did.
nomination doesn't need to be seconded, but the vote has to be.
okay. So by roll call vote, all those in favor of Mr. Zemanian being chairman of CPC, let's see if I go. Don,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
John,
Yes,
Rich,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes, I'll accept it, and yes.
And the chairman, the vice chairman votes yes, so there you go.
Thank you, Dwight. I can take the meeting back from here, and thank you all for your support. It means a lot to me, and I work hard at this because I love it. I love what this committee does. I've learned from all of you, your examples and your leadership in the past, so thank you for your vote of confidence tonight. So at this point, I'm going to ask for nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Dwight McCarron.
Second. Is there any other nominations? Hearing none, I would accept a motion to have Dwight as our vice chairman again.
So moved.
Second,
By roll call, John,
Yes.
Dwight,
Yes,
Michael,
Yes.
John,
yes.
Rich. Yes. And the chair votes yes. Thank you again for doing this, Dwight. One last position is our treasury position. I would like a nomination for treasurer.
I nominate Michael Barrett.
I second it.
Are there any other nominations? Michael, you accept?
I accept.
I need a motion to make Michael Barrett our treasurer.
So moved.
Second,
All right, we got a motion and a second. By roll call, Don,
Yes.
Dwight,
yes.
Michael,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Rich? Yes. And the chair votes yes. Thank you all. Good choices this year. So the other item we have on our agenda tonight is a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Seconded.
Okay. One last time, by roll call, Don,
Yes.
Dwight,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Rich? Yes. The chair votes yes. Again, I want to thank you all for your hard work here at the committee. We all have busy lives, but you put in a tremendous amount of effort, and it's just a pleasure to work with all of you. To the public, you have a great night and enjoy the rest of your summer. We'll see you in September.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Sounds like a song.
Barry, you can stop the recording.
Yep, I'm just stopping the recording. It's stopped now.
Excellent.
All right.
All right, We will catch up at some point tomorrow. Thank you for your time tonight,
All
Barry.
right. Yeah, good night, Rich.
Good night, Barry. By the way, we're this far away from getting that grant from Stoughton. They are recommending $218,000. And we've asked them to make clarification, which I think they should post. So, we're waiting for their response to our input.
Yeah, I'll put it on the agenda at our next meeting. Hopefully we'll have a good news update by then.
Yeah, we purposely didn't put you on this
Yeah, I
one
didn't have
because
anything.
what was the point? You know,
Yeah,
you're gonna tell us when you're ready. I don't want to bore people.
No, I don't either.
with repetitive stuff. And I don't want to create additional pressure for you. There's no reason for you to talk about it.
If it's ready by September, we'll go with it. If not, we'll wait till it is ready.
I have every confidence we're gonna get this money and I'm thrilled at the progress you've made.
Yeah.
Really done a lot of hard work on this.
And Rich has really worked very hard on this. He's really put a lot of effort into this.
Yeah, no, I know he has.
Well, it's been with a lot of help, Barry, with yourself, Fran, and you mentioned, he's
fantastic.
He's great.
Yep. She's really good. So,
All right.
Barry, thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Hopefully I get to see
Thank
you
you.
next time.